Yo, what's going on, and welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. And today we are going to be test running and reviewing Venti, the Windborn Bard. Now before we do that, I did want to check out this whatever this recipe collection. Oh, it's just 2 recipes. Okay, I thought it would be like something special, but nothing cool. All right, back to Venti. Now Venti, this is the first time that we're doing a test run for a character that I have used extensively, because Venti is a great character. I picked him up when he was first available, when the game was starting, and I used him a whole bunch. I use him a little bit less now just because I have other cool, flashy characters. And Venti is just kind of one of those supporty characters that makes easy stuff easier, but doesn't necessarily do a whole lot for you on incredibly difficult stuff. So it's kind of hard to rate Venti for beating big bosses and stuff because he doesn't offer too much in terms of that. So other characters that are going to deal more damage or protect your team more are going to be more useful. But Venti is really great against any characters that are light. And so there's like heavy classed enemies and there's light classed enemies. Anyone who is light, Venti is going to make sure that they do not get to play the game. And so we're going to take a look at his talents, and you'll see just exactly why that is. If you don't know about Venti, then you will learn what all of his abilities and constellations do here. But I'm sure you know all about Venti already because he's a very popular character. People love him. He's very low investment to do his job, so he's a fairly safe pickup for anyone just looking for a good support for their team. Now, when we get into his auto attacks, there's nothing really special here. He's an Anemo archer, so he will have a basic attack string with arrows, and he will have a charge attack that does Anemo damage. Nothing special. Then, when we move on to his skill, Skyward Sonnet, this is going to have a press and a hold. If you press it, he's going to summon a wind domain at an opponent's location or somewhere in front of him, and it's going to deal AoE Anemo damage and launch people into the air. This skill is really good for generating a lot of Anemo particles, and make sure that you get your ult very quickly because your ult is pretty much your bread and butter. Now, your hold skill, on the other hand, is going to summon a larger wind domain, but it's going to do it at around Venti, and it will do essentially the same thing. It will launch enemies, give you Anemo particles, as well as Venti is going to ride up into the air. Now, if we combine this with his passive talent down here, holding Skyward Sonnet creates an up current that lasts for 20 seconds. Just like a little bit of maneuverability around the battlefield, or like the ability to climb cliffs easier. Once Venti reaches the apex of his little thing, you can then open your wings and stay gliding there for a little while. Now, the thing that we've all been waiting for is his elemental burst, Wind's Grand Ode, and he's going to fire off an arrow made of countless coalesced winds. Of course, yep, that's what I would describe it as, creating a huge storm eye that sucks opponents in and deals continuous Anemo damage. Now, this is kind of like a giant vacuum that's going to pick up all light characters and just like put them all in one tight little space and do constant Anemo damage to them, and it's absolutely ridiculous CC. Now, this becomes even better because if it comes in contact with something, much like all Anemo abilities, it swirls, but if it comes in contact with something, it will keep that element the entire time. So, unlike a swirl that just does a quick little hit of normal Anemo, this one is going to pick up the element, and then anyone who is in the little vacuum is going to take both Anemo and that elemental damage. Now, this is going to have some other great effects if you look at his constellations, but it also works really well with a specific artifact set that we can talk about here in just a second. When we look at his other passive talent, this one is just ridiculous because if you look at his elemental burst, you can see it. Oh, they did raise it, didn't they? It used to be a 40 energy cost, which was pretty stupid because he would just use it all the time. especially since when you look at this, it regenerates 15 energy once the effect ends. So essentially you use your elemental burst, then when it runs out, you instantly get 15 energy. But the other thing that makes this pretty good is whatever element you throw into your elemental burst, characters of that elemental type will also get 15 energy back. So it can be really good for generating energy for your other characters. Now, Wind Rider, decreased gliding stamina consumption for your own party members by 20%. It's not amazing. I think it's the exact same thing that Amber gets, and everyone has Amber from the start. But it can definitely help you if you're trying to glide to like faraway places like that little island in the middle of the ocean. But now let's move on to his constellations. Venti is a little bit odd because his first constellation is really bad, but his other constellations are really good. So if you're getting constellations, I would not stop at C1 because C1 doesn't do a whole lot for you. Venti's job is a support. So he likes to use his elemental skill to knock people up in the air, and he likes to use his elemental burst to hold small enemies in place. Now, what his first constellation does is it makes it so he fires 2 additional arrows per aim shot, dealing 30% or 33% of the original arrow's damage. You're really not auto-attacking a whole lot as Venti. Can you use him as a main DPS? Yes, and then this would become useful. Would I do that? No, probably not, because it's just not necessary. Like, you could... Venti is so good at just emphasizing anyone else who is in his party by sucking up everyone into one small place so your characters can just like freely wail on them, that you're kind of wasting his potential if you use him as a main DPS instead. Now, I'm moving on to his C2. Whenever he uses his elemental skill, opponents hit by it are going to have decreased anemo resistance and physical resistance by 12% for 10 seconds. Plus, anyone who gets knocked up into the air is going to get this effect a second time for as long as they're in the air. So essentially, if you knock anyone up with it, then they are taking 24% extra anemo damage and physical damage. Not as relevant for physical damage because not a whole lot of physical damage dealers can actually hit airborne targets besides archer characters. But most archer characters don't go physical damage builds. So I don't really know why that part is there. But if you are going main DPS Venti, then I suppose this helps you if you have physical damage and you're auto-attacking a lot. Now, Constellation 3 is just a skill up for his Elemental Burst. Constellation 4, whenever he picks up an elemental orb or particle, he receives 25% anemo bonus damage. Like I said earlier, his elemental skill is really good at creating particles. So if you pick up a particle and then fire off your ultimate, then the ultimate is going to deal 25% more anemo damage, which is pretty nuts. Moving on, his elemental skill gets 3 levels up. And finally, his Constellation 6, which works really well with the Viridescent Venerer artifact set, and I'll show it to you in just a second. I don't know if he'll have it equipped in the actual test, so I'll go ahead and show you my Venti. But what this does is targets who take damage from it take damage from the elemental burst, have their anemo resistance decreased by 20%. So just straight off the bat, you're doing 20% extra damage, which is pretty nice from the ultimate. But if you absorb an element, then their resistance towards the corresponding element is also decreased by 20%. So this means that everything about the ultimate is going to be dealing 20 extra percent. Plus, since Venti doesn't need to be out while he's doing that, if you swirl it up with an element of your main DPS, then your main DPS can come out and slap people and deal 20% extra damage for that amount of time, which is really, really good. So we're going to go and look at my Venti just really quick so we can point out what Viridescent Venerer does. Now, if you look here, first of all, you're getting extra anemo damage, which is great on Venti. Venti, you could build whatever the heck you want on him. He'll do his job. He doesn't really even need artifacts or anything. You just press the Q button and then someone else kills everybody because they can't play the game. But either way, it increases swirl damage. But here's the second thing, decreases opponent's elemental resistance to the element infused in the swirl by 40%. So this means that if you swirl Electro, then all your Electro characters are going to be dealing 40% extra damage. If if you have that Constellation 6, all of a sudden all of your Electro characters are dealing 60% extra damage, which is just a really big number to deal extra damage of just because Venti pressed a single button. Now, let's get back to Venti's test run, and I'm not sure what characters they're going to put us with here, but I do know something interesting that might, it could be relevant for some people for using Venti. Now, I mentioned earlier, and I don't think we're going to be able to do it with Xiangling. I don't think it's possible with Xiangling. I mentioned earlier that there's like 2 classes of weight for enemies, right? So you have light enemies and you have heavy enemies. Heavy enemies can't really be knocked up like that or sucked up into his tornado. So once we actually get the tornado, we'll go ahead and show how that works. Oh, he has the new bow too. Interesting. But, so we have the tornado now, and we're gonna go ahead and suck everyone. Unfortunately, since there's a water slime here, they're all gonna get water sucked up. Or they're gonna get swirled with water. But you can see just like a ridiculous amount of elemental reactions going on because all these slimes are getting sucked up into each other, and they all deal bonus damage to each other. So it's kind of funny how many elemental reactions Venti can create. Just if there's slimes present, then it becomes insane. If there aren't slimes, then it's limited to whatever your party can do. But here we get a nice little fire one, and it's just that easy. Like, we hardly had to do anything because all we had to do was break the Abyss Mage's shield. He was the only one who couldn't get sucked up immediately. There also weren't any heavy enemies here, so I couldn't really show what I wanted to do. But I have done it before, and I've done it specifically with Klee, but I assume other two-hand sword characters can do it. Anyone who has like a big impact and the ability to knock over a heavy character, I'm sure you've probably seen it before where you like knock down a big like boss dude or like mini boss dude. If you can get them into the knockdown state, then they can be knocked up by Venti. So that means they can also be sucked up into the tornado. So if you have a character like Klee or a two-hand sword user that can maybe stumble these opponents over by hitting them with enough stuff, then you can potentially get them into this tornado and keep them locked in place for the rest of your team. Now, another thing to note is that the tornado, we should start another one just so we can show this off. The tornado puts enemies in the air, right? So here, we'll go ahead, swirl them all up, and we'll come out with Xiangling, and we're gonna auto attack. You can see we're not hitting anyone with our auto attacks. They are too high up in the air. So this means that you need characters that are going to work well with how high Venti pulls them. If your character can't reach them, then your character can't do damage. So we can do stuff like this with Xiangling, where we drop Gyoba. Gyoba's not really doing it either, huh? I wonder what we can hit them with. This is a better question. It doesn't seem like Xiangling's doing a bang-up job.
Time for takeoff.
Let's try this. So here we got a little bit, but not great. But yeah, this is pretty much just what I wanted to point out. You need to make sure that you're using characters that can actually hit the things that Venti is putting up into the air, because lots of melee characters just can't reach them. Like this auto attack string maybe will get them with one of the up slashes or something, but it's not going to be able to do consistent damage. You saw that Gyoba was just kind of shooting out his fire right below them and wasn't able to reach them. So you have to keep that in mind. Range characters like archers are really good. Catalyst users can be really good. Klee is a little bit difficult to use with Venti because Klee her bombs kind of arc downwards. So you want to either be charge attacking because the charge attack has a higher up hit, or you want to stand at an angle to where your bombs are like going to hit their feet or something, and then it's really good. But if you can't hit them, then Venti kind of loses a lot of his effectiveness. Now I really wonder what set they put Venti on for this, because usually they don't put the old characters on very good sets, but it does seem like they put him on full Viridescent Venerer for this. So he's probably got pretty decent stats. What are we looking at here? Wow, he's got a lot of crit rate. Not as much crit damage as you'd probably like, but if you have a Venti like this, you're probably good to go. You'll have a slightly more animo damage because your cup will be fully leveled to 20. This Venti build is pretty much ideal, and this new weapon is pretty good on him, but not necessary. So that's pretty much all I got to say for Venti. Hopefully it gives you an idea. If you're thinking about pulling Venti, he's definitely a great character, but again, he's not going to help you with like big boss monsters. That's not really the point of Venti. He's really good at dealing with lots of enemies that are small. So if one of the things that you were struggling with was floor 11-2 in the Spiral Abyss, Venti's very good on that one because he kind of gathers everyone up and stops them from being able to hit the little spire thing in the middle that you're trying to protect for that floor. So that is my piece on Venti. Hopefully you found this useful. Make sure that you got a character that you plan on using with Venti, because while Venti is sweet and can do a lot, if you don't have anyone that can take advantage of what Venti is offering the team, he's not that useful. But there's plenty of characters that can make use of that, so I'm sure you can find something. Either way, hopefully you enjoyed, hopefully you found this useful, and I will see you next time.